Interpretation of the 37th verse of Sura Ibrahim. It is reported that Ibn Abbas said, "The first woman who began to wear a belt was the mother of Ismail, and she did this in order to hide her traces from Sarah. Then Ibrahim brought her to the Kaaba along with her son Ismail, whom she was still breastfeeding. He left them at a large tree on a hill at the top of the mosque, where Zamzam subsequently scored. At that time there was no one in Mecca, just as there was no water there. He left them, leaving a bag of dates and a skin of water, and Ismail's mother followed him, saying, "O Ibrahim, where are you going, leaving us in this valley, where there are no people or anything at all?" She repeated these words, but he did not even turn to her. Then she asked him, "Did Allah command you to do this?" He answered, "Yes." She said, "Then he will not leave us." Then she returned, and Ibrahim went on, reaching a mountain pass where they could not see him. He turned towards the Kaaba, raised his hands to the sky and called to Allah with the words, "Our Lord, I settled part of my offspring in the valley where there is no grain at your sacred house. Our Lord, let them pray. Fill the hearts of some people with love for them and give them fruits, so that they may be grateful." As for Ismail's mother, she breastfed him and drank all the water, and when the fur was empty, she and her son began to feel thirsty. She watched how he wriggled. And then she could not stand it and moved away from him. The closest mountain to her was As-Safa, and she climbed on it, turned towards the valley and began to look around, hoping to see someone. But she did not see anyone. Then she went down from As-Safa, and when she reached the valley, she raised the flaps of her clothes and rushed to run as soon as an exhausted person can run. When she crossed valley and reached Al-Marva, then climbed on it and began to look around, hoping to see someone, but again she did not see anyone. She did this 7 times. Ibn Abbas narrated that the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, "That is why people run between them." Then he continued, "When she reached Al-Marwa, she heard a sound. She said to herself, 'Hush.' She began to listen and heard him again. Then she said, 'You let me hear yourself, but can you help?' And then, at the sight of the Zamzam spring, she saw an angel who dug the ground with his heel or wing until water gushed out from there. She began to enclose the source and fill her bottle, but even after she filled it, the water continued to flow." Ibn Abbas said that the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, "May Allah have mercy on the mother of Ismail. If she had not touched Zamzam, it would have turned into a stream." Then he continued, "She got drunk and fed her son, and then the angel said to her, 'Do not be afraid of death, for, truly, here is the house of Allah, which this boy and his father will build, and Allah will not destroy his family,' to the right and left of her. This went on until people from the tribe or clan of Jurham, who arrived from the direction of Kad, passed by them. Stopping at the bottom of Mecca, they saw a bird soaring in the sky and said, 'It is only this bird circling over the water, but we know that there is no water in this valley.' Then they sent 1 or 2 messengers there, who found water, returned and informed them about it. After which they themselves went there. At that time Ismail's mother was sitting by the water, and they asked her, 'Will you let us stop next to you?' She replied, 'I will, but you will not have rights to this source,' and they agreed to this. Ibn Abbas said that the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, and the mother of Ismail, who loved to talk with people, liked it. Then he continued, "Then they stopped there and sent for their families, who remained with them, and some of them settled there. In the meantime, the boy grew up and learned Arabic from them, and they admired and appreciated him, and when he reached adulthood, they married him to one of their compatriots. After the death of Ismail's mother and his marriage, Ibrahim came there to see those whom he had left there, but he did not find Ismail at home. Then he began to ask his wife about him, and she said, "He left to get something for us." Then he asked her about how they live and what their situation is, and she replied, "It's bad, because we are in need and in poverty." She began to complain to him, and he said, "When your husband comes, greet him with peace and tell him to change the threshold at his door." Returning, Ismail, as if sensing something, asked, "Did anyone come to you?" His wife replied, "Yes, such and such an old man came to us who asked us about you, and I told him about you, and then he asked me about how we live. And I told him that we were in need and we are in distress." Ismail asked, "Did he give you any advice?" She replied, "Yes, he told me to greet you with peace and tell you to change the threshold of your door." Ismail said, "It was my father, and he ordered me to leave you. Come back to your family." Then he divorced her and married another woman. Ibrahim spent as much time apart from them as Allah pleased, and then came to them, but again did not find Ismail. Then he went to his wife and began to ask about him, and she said, "He left to get something for us." He asked, "How are you?" and began to ask her about how they live and what their situation is, and she said, "We are fine and everything is enough," after which she thanked Allah. Ibrahim asked, "What do you eat?" She replied, "Meat." He asked, "What are you drinking?" She replied, "Water," and then he said, "O God, bless their meat and water." The Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, "At that time they did not have grain, and if they had, then he would have called the blessing of Allah on the grain." Ibn Abbas said, "If someone eats only meat and water outside of Mecca, it will certainly harm him." Then he continued, Ibrahim said, "When your husband comes, greet him with peace and tell him to strengthen the threshold of his door." Returning, Ismail asked, "Did anyone come to you?" His wife replied, "Yes, a handsome old man came to us." She spoke of him with praise and said, "He asked me about you, and I told him about you, and then he asked me about how we live, and I told him that we were fine." Ismail asked, "Did he give you any advice?" She replied, "Yes, he greets you with peace and commands you to strengthen the threshold of your door." Ismail said, "It was my father, and the threshold is you, and he ordered me not to part with you." After that, Ibrahim spent as much time apart from them as Allah pleased. And then he came to them and saw that Ismail was sharpening his arrows under a large tree next to Zamzam. Seeing him, he got up from his seat and went towards him, and they greeted each other as a father greets his son, and a son greets his father. Then Ibrahim said, "O Ismail, indeed, I received one command from Allah." Ismail said, "Do what your Lord commanded you." He asked, "Will you help me?" Ismail said, "I will help you." Then he said, "Indeed, Allah ordered me to build a house here." He pointed to a hill that towered over everything around. After that they raised the foundation of the Kaaba. Ismail carried stones, and Ibrahim built it. When the walls were erected, Ismail brought and put this stone, and Ibrahim stood on it and continued building. Ismail brought him stones, and they said, "Our Lord, accept from us. Verily, you are the hearing, the knowing." This hadith was narrated by al-Bukhari.